Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We want to go ahead and get started so we can get everybody out of here. Welcome to the B. Thomas Golisano College of Computing and Information Sciences and to the Dean's Lecture Series. I'm thrilled to see such a great crowd here this afternoon. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Andrew Sears. I'm the Dean of the college. I was counting days, but we're month 2 now, so we'll skip to months. Before I introduce our speaker, I just wanted to give you a brief background on this series. My understanding is this is the 10th year of this lecture series, and this will be our 44th speaker overall. And the purpose is really to bring people together, bring people from industry and academia here to share their thoughts and insights with regard to computing and information technologies with the campus community, with the students, with the faculty, as well as with the community at large. So I'm very pleased that we're able to get together again today as part of this series. At this time, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our professional interpreters. We have Houston Smith and Sandy Cooler with us today, and let's thank them for the valuable service that they are providing. And now I will deviate from my norm. I hate reading from scripts, but we have a bio, so I have to get it right. So I'm going to start reading instead of just speaking spontaneously. It's my pleasure to introduce Hal Abelson. He is the professor of electrical engineering and computer science at MIT, as well as the creator of Google App Inventor for Android. Hal is the class of 1922 professor of electrical engineering and computer science at MIT and a fellow of the IEEE. He is the winner of the 1995 Booth Education Award given by the IEEE Computer Society, cited for his continued contributions to the pedagogy and teaching of introductory computer science. He serves as the co-chair of the MIT Council on Educational Technology, which oversees MIT's strategic educational technology activities and investments. And in this capacity, he played key roles in fostering MIT's instructional educational technology initiatives, such as MIT Open Courseware and DSpace. Hal is a leader in the world movement towards openness and democratization of society and intellectual resources. He is a founding director of Creative Commons, Public Knowledge, and the Free Software Foundation, and director of the Center for Democracy and Technology, organizations that are devoted to strengthening and the global intellectual commons. So without any further delay, I'd like to please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Hal.
Slide. Great. Technology actually works sometimes. God, I am just gratified by seeing so many people show up. If any of you ever go talk at a place like Microsoft Research, you get this big giant room, and there are probably 3 people scattered on it. And they're always a little embarrassed that they invited you, and they say, well, it looks like there's nobody here, but actually there are tens of thousands of people at Microsoft who are watching this from their desktops over video right now. I've never heard anyone ever admit to doing that at Microsoft. So it's just really nice that you've all turned out to hear, for God's sakes, what I have to say. Let's start by going back into ancient history. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember all the way back to 2005. Some of you might remember in 2005, there was a technology that was going to totally revolutionize education, and it was called the iPod. Not the iPad, right? The iPod. So if any of you remember that. And Apple, one of its experiments, they agreed to give the entire Duke University entering class iPods. And what students were supposed to do with these iPods was to record and share and comment on educational materials. And the article you are looking at here is in 2006, a year after this experiment, or a year after the experiment started, where the Chronicle of Higher Education is reporting on the experience of the first year. And basically what happened is the upperclassmen at Duke were so pissed that the freshmen all got these free iPods that they went to Duke, and Duke renegotiated with Apple that the whole undergraduate body was going to get free iPods, and everyone was really happy. And that's what this article's about. But there was a problem, because it turned out that a lot of what these students were doing with these iPods was recording and sharing and commenting on educational materials. And out of the woodwork comes a helpful intellectual property attorney. So it's always marvelous how helpful intellectual property attorneys are always appearing out of the woodwork. And this one says, do students know that they might not have permission to do this stuff with educational materials? And do faculty realize how easy it would be to take these materials and put them on the internet? And I looked at this, and I just had this vision, again, for those of you who recognize, and I said, it's Napster, right? People all over the world, shamelessly, in flagrant disregard of intellectual property law, learning. And a little while later, when the RIAA did its mailing of places of universities for sharing copies of sharing Metallica songs, which was threatening civilization at that time, as you might recall. There were articles like this in our MIT student newspaper, and I sort of imagined, gee, suppose they were like that. And in 2000, 5 years ago, that was sort of a joke. Here's another example from University of Southern California. This also happened in response to the RIAA letters. The dean of libraries sent this message to all USC undergraduates. Read that. It is a startling comment to come from a university administrator. It says, as an educational institution, USC's purpose is to promote and foster the creation of intellectual property. That's an amazing statement. I mean, I would have thought that as an educational institution, USC's purpose would have something to do with educating people. But apparently not. There is this view that somehow a university should be thought of as a kind of factory for intellectual property. And the stuff that I showed you about sharing calculus lectures was a weird joke in, maybe 2007 or something, and it's not a joke now. There is a struggle going on between a view of the university that says this is about bringing young people into the culture and making them achieve, putting them in a position where they can achieve their broadest potential and spreading all of this stuff, versus a view that says a university is a kind of factory which produces a thing that we will call intellectual property, and that in order to make most efficient use of that university product, you take it out of the hands of the people who have no appreciation for it, namely the faculty and the students, and you turn it over to a class of professionals who understand how to meter it and measure it and use it effectively. And that struggle is going on right now. And you have to think about where you're going to sit on that spectrum if you think about the future of the university. And that's what this talk is. Let me talk a little bit about infrastructure. So since I'm a computer geek, I want to organize this talk in terms of infrastructure. I want to think about infrastructure to promote openness in the academy. And I'm going to talk about several kinds of infrastructure. All right, so one, I'm going to talk about infrastructure for open content. That's going to be the most of what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to talk about infrastructure around university policy. What are policies that universities could do to promote openness? I'm going to talk about legal infrastructure just a little bit. And then kind of a coda at the end for all the techies who are here. I will talk a bit about programming platform infrastructures. So that's the way the talk is going to go. Let me start with open content infrastructure, and I'm going to talk, maybe to brag a little bit, about stuff we've done at MIT and that I've been involved in, which is MIT OpenCourseware and the movement for what's called institutional archives. So MIT OpenCourseware celebrated its 10th anniversary last May. We opened it officially in 2001, April Fool's Day, in fact, and it made the front page of the New York Times because in an era when universities were all saying there's a tremendous business in taking faculty lecture notes and materials, and we were going to publish it, and every university thought it was going to be a publisher, and people talked about things like a $2 trillion economy from knowledge. MIT basically said, we're going to take all of the content from which our faculty create courses, we're going to put it on the internet, open for everyone, for free, and forever. And basically what it is for each course, and we're going to do this for all MIT courses, all 2,000 of them, and what you go when you see to the OpenCourseware site are collections of things like this, problem sets and solutions, and lecture notes, a small number of videos, because it's expensive to make videos, the exams from a course, the solutions to the exams. When we put this out, we got a lot of letters from faculty saying, boy, is it great that you're putting up exams for your courses. Please take down the solutions. And we'd sort of write back, well, that's not really the point. The point is not to make it so you don't have to teach or prepare class materials. The point is to see what MIT is doing. But anyway, this has been very, very successful. Here's our statistics as of last June. So that's, we sort of hit all MIT 2,000 courses, but over 10 years, of course, some courses die. So there are about 600 courses that have been mothballed and put in an archive, MIT DSpace, that I'll talk about a little bit later. We have translation partners we work with. Lots of courses have been translated. There are places which have bad internet infrastructure, a lot of places in Africa which can't afford to get this over the net from MIT, and we send out hard drives to let people create mirror sites. So there are 280 some odd mirror sites, and we have a lot of MIT faculty participating, which means that if you're a faculty member who's teaching a course which went on OpenCourseware. So those are the numbers. One thing I'll say here are the distribution numbers. And one of the things I'll say later is that these numbers were impressive for 2005. So you should look at this and say, that's nice, but you wouldn't consider it impressive for something in today's internet age. But anyway, last June, there are 1.5 million visits to the site. One of the interesting things is MIT is a pretty small community compared with Rochester. We've got maybe 15,000 people, students and faculty who've been looking at this. So out of that, if there are 9,000 visits from MIT, that's pretty significant. This is the month of June. The other thing you see is that in today's internet, there's a real much larger distribution on things like iTunes. So if you look at the whole number of visits to the MIT site, that's actually less than just the downloads of the small number of courses that are on video from iTunes. So it's another thing to think about how the world's changing. The other thing to understand is this is an international phenomenon. So actually the minority of our visitors come from North America. So there's a snapshot of OpenCourseWare. It's also not only about MIT, because one of the things that we were trying to do when we started this is to help generate a movement. So there's something called the OpenCourseWare Federation, the OpenCourseWare Consortium, which is a bunch of universities, about 250 of them now, who are putting up courses. And one of the things you'll see if you're counting numbers, which is kind of, unfortunately, a very large fraction of those numbers come from MIT. So those 18,500 courses include MIT's 2,000 courses. And we wish many more universities were sharing things. And you might want to think about why you're not, if you aren't. Okay. OpenCourseWare started in 2001, and by now has grown up past OpenCourseWare, past the OpenCourseWare Consortium, to a thing called Open Educational Resources. So that's a buzzword that maybe some of you have heard, which basically means there's a lot of educational materials on the internet which is put out under open licenses so that people can share and remix and reuse them. And this has now become a very large movement that's kind of in the psyche of people who are publishing educational materials. You may have noticed that the Gates Foundation has given out a very, very large grant for producing materials for junior colleges. And one of the conditions of the grant is that they have to be put out as open educational resources. There are many places that are putting out what in the buzzword is OER. I've got a slide here from the Hewlett Foundation, which was one of the original funders of MIT OpenCourseWare. And that's really the place that moved this thing from just MIT to a movement called OER. So you'll hear that buzzword a lot. And that's really one of two visions. So if we go back to why is that? What's the vision that is motivating this? So there's kind of the OpenCourseWare vision, which says, gee, it would be better for humanity if the educational materials from the world's universities were available to everyone for unrestricted use. In fact, the word open educational resources comes from a UNESCO conference in 2004 talking about MIT OpenCourseWare and like things for the benefit of humanity. That's where the word open educational resources come out with. There's another vision, which is based in MIT DSpace, which says not only that, but the research products of and the intellectual resources of the world's greatest research institutions should also be available to all of humanity. Right, these are two companion visions. Let me show you MIT DSpace. So when we started DSpace, again, this was remarkable. We started talking about it in 1998 and 1999, and I'm hoping you're sort of saying, well, sure, there's lots of institutional repositories. Let me show you MIT's. If you go to MIT DSpace, today, you'll see a whole list of the communities at MIT from which you can get published material. There's mine, which is the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, and you go click on that, and you see the list of authors in that library collection from which you can get papers. And if you go click on a particular author, you'll see a list in which you can select stuff. What's kind of cool to old ancient timers like me is there are things like the 1970 report from the MIT Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, which is ancient stuff. And I could pick that up. That's a thing that is kind of, and this is really important to the librarians and the librarians in the audience, I get a page which is kind of the bibliographic information. And really important to all of you web geeks, but not to everybody else, is that there's a thing there called a handle. What a handle is is a permanent URL. Right, so the notion of a handle is if you put something up on your server at a certain URL, if you move the server to a different address, that URL becomes obsolete if you don't update the DNS. A handle is a permanent URL, which is guaranteed by some organization to be there even if the servers move or change. What that means in library terms is this is now a citable publication because you have a stable reference on the internet to look at it. So there's no reason why the internet couldn't take the place of all of these journal archives, because what you need from the journal archives is a stable reference. In this case, you get a stable reference. This is something that was not published before, and of course you've got the paper. Right? So it's a little bit cool to be able to go back and look at some memo that, until we did it was sitting around in the internal document room at MIT, a historically important thing, and now it's available to the world. So that is an example of MIT's institutional archive. And again, this has grown. It was never our intent that this should only be about MIT. DSpace is a bunch of software for managing archives. We released it on the network open source, which is critical so people can take it up. And what you're seeing is a graph of the number of DSpace instances since about the time it was really ready, kind of made together by MIT together with a lot of effort from Hewlett-Packard Laboratories. And you've seen the growth. So this is the number of places that are running DSpace instances in general for some kind of institutional archive. And it's now, I think, if you look around institutional repositories and people do surveys, it's the largest used one. And that's because it was created with a very healthy open source community around the software. It's evolved, of course. It's evolved also organizationally, not just in terms of software. By now, it merged a couple of years ago with the other very large repository thing, which was Fedora Commons. And it merged to create a thing called DuraSpace. And that's now an organization in which the places get together and talk about policy issues around them. It's making a new thing now, because you see in the technology, it's got a newer thing called DuraCloud, where you have institutional repositories that are now sitting around in a cloud base. And as the technology evolves, it will evolve. And it's got, there are probably 1,700 institutional repositories based on DSpace and about another 500 that are based on Fedora Commons. So it's become a real movement. And when I look back, and those of us at MIT look back, the measure of success is in 1999, 2000, 2001, people were saying, what's this institutional repository stuff? All sorts of provosts and deans and presidents would say, why should we do that? And librarians at these places were arguing very hard that they should do it. And it was just this weird idea. And today you say, oh, gosh, we're going to have an institutional repository. So that's a tremendous example of success. And tremendous example of the power of these visions. So OpenCourseWare, I'm very proud of, has matured into a grown-up thing called Open Educational Resources. And again, remember I said when we introduced OpenCourseWare, we were on the front page of the New York Times. What a weird thing that a university would take its course material and put it up for free. And today everybody goes, yeah, we know all about that OER stuff. And DSpace has matured into this notion of institutional repositories. And everybody says, oh, that's nice. Yeah, okay, you got an institutional repository. I'm happy for you. Right? So part of me wants to talk about this and be very proud and talk about success. And part of me wants to say, man, this is all so pre-2010. I mean, my God, that's the old world. That was the world of the internet starting in 2000, and it grew up and it was great. Because the issues now are different. And they're different because of evolving technology and evolving, I want to say, sophistication, what I'd like to say is that this notion of open educational resources, of which there are lots and lots and lots now, has formed a substrate on which we can now start talking at the next level. And the next level is going to be really interesting for universities and the research community. Open educational resources, right? They're there. You can upload stuff to the internet, and you know you can do that. What's the big deal? And that's because the infrastructure for doing that sharing has become commoditized. So when we started MIT OpenCourseWare, it was a big deal. Well, it wasn't a big deal to go put up a web server. It was a big deal to put up a web server that everybody in the world could access stuff on. And now it's easy, right? You don't think, you want 50,000 people to access it? Yeah, that's okay. You want 100,000 people to access it? Yeah, I didn't have to think about that. You want 5 million people to access it? Well, I got to think a little bit, but it's not an outrageous thing. That infrastructure's there, and you're starting to see things like Khan Academy. How many people, by the way, know about Khan Academy? Great. How many people over 40? Right? How many people here are over 40? Okay, me. Okay, I'm allowed. Keep your hand up if you know about Khan Academy. Okay, so Khan Academy is the biggest phenomenon right now in education on the internet. And Sal Khan has decided he's just going to take all of knowledge and he's going to make courses that are everything for free. He's focusing mostly on high school. His format is to make very short videos. One of the things that we are learning, we have all been saying as educators for a very long time that the standard lecture format where somebody talks at you like I'm doing, for God's sake, for an hour, God help me, is the wrong format for learning anything. And no lecture that demands your attention should be longer than about 6 minutes long. And we've all been saying this, but Khan is doing it. So he's got all of these lectures up now, loaded up to YouTube. It's a format where they're 6 minutes long. And guess what? People are watching them. So if your kid is in high school and has a chemistry exam and wants to know how to balance equations, you can pick up the stupid chemistry book, but why do that when you can go look at a 6-minute video on Khan Academy where Sal is basically, he's got a very nice voice and a very nice presentation explaining it better. So there's a whole, for the people who know about it, the way that kids in high school are learning about science and their parents are telling them, they're saying, go to Khan Academy. So he's got millions and millions and millions of viewers. The other thing that he's got, which is not only the videos, there's, by the way, a list of some of the courses on Khan Academy, right? He has this modest goal to do all of knowledge. By the way, in case you haven't, for those of you who are trying to learn Python and computer science, he's just put up some Python stuff. Go, it is better than your classes, I can assure you. Go to it. Go to it.
I just wanted to plug this a little, Al, since you're talking about it. John Ressig, who's an alumni of this college and created jQuery, is now the infrastructure development manager for Khan Academy. He's probably done some of those Python lessons himself. And we'll be doing jQuery lessons.
Yeah, thank you. That's really, that was like, go ahead.
Through the Foss box in the Innovation Center, if you want to co-op for Khan Academy with us, John and I will work with you to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the perfect ringer question, and we didn't even do it. Because the other thing that's going on is that there are also these exercises. So the other thing that people know about education is that not only is the right time period about 6 minutes, but you intersperse that with an immediate feedback thing to say, gosh, if you just learn this thing, you ought to be able to do this exercise. This is known. This is known by educational research. It has had that much impact on the way that your faculty are lecturing to you. Right? Think about it. And so what's happened as university faculty have been sitting around in committee meetings arguing about whether students come to lecture. Sal Khan has just said, well, screw that all. I don't need them. I've got YouTube. I've got jQuery. I've got Steve Jacobs who will help people do this, right? And as we sit here in the universities, that outside world is changing. And it's basically saying, look, you guys, that was a really nice arguments your faculty were having for 1995 and 2003 and whatever it is. But the world's changing right now. There's YouTube. And your students are not going to go wait for your faculty to sit in some committee meeting and tell you you can go watch YouTube. It's more effective. And of course, as Steve just said, let me sort of go back. There's a nice little language. So if you look at the actual problem, it says, there's some physics problem, right? And it says, it posted the problem on the previous slide, and there's a little language in which you can say, I want to take a question where I'm going to pick a random number to be the height and speed of some projectile, and then their answers, and depending on that, I will generate various solutions, and I'll say solve for the time for this is a physics problem, solve for the time in this projectile thing, and then there'll be a little computer program that said, based on the problem, here's the answer that someone should have put in. And so it's very easy for someone to create a new problem. And then as Steve just alluded to, what's Khan Academy doing now? They are crowdsourcing the creation of these exercises. Using exactly the software that Steve just mentioned, right? Developed partly by somebody from RIT. And now there's this giant crowdsourcing of these physics problems. So it's not going to be your physics faculty leading a textbook where there's 20 nice questions on projectile motion. And it's not merely going to be, oh, there's a textbook which maybe accumulated 50 problems on projectile motion. There's now a crowdsourced source of them. And you can see where this is going to go. So not only are there going to be these great lectures, but the very, very best homework is also going to be sitting there on the internet for free. And your faculty 5 years from now are going to be sitting still in committee meetings arguing about how you should assign homework, while you guys are saying, I want to do the test, I'm going to go to YouTube. Hell with that. That's made possible because there's now this substrate of open educational resources where people just take it for granted that you can put this stuff on the internet. The other thing, how many people know what this is? Do a test. Okay, this is an artificial intelligence course coming out of Stanford University that's taught by two outstanding people in the field. For those of you who know about robotics and machine learning, Sebastian Thrun actually just came from initially CMU and then went to Stanford. He works on driverless vehicles. Anybody heard about the Google driverless car thing? That's run by Sebastian runs that. He's one of the world's experts in what's called probabilistic robotics. And then you can't quite see cut off is Peter Norvig, who is Google's chief scientist, who also, if you take artificial intelligence, Norvig has written the book on artificial intelligence. And they did this thing. They said, gee, we're gonna lecture the Stanford course. We're going to take our lectures and we're going to do them in Khan style. We're going to make these 6-minute videos that are the content of our lectures. We're going to make some problems and we're going to put them on the internet. And Sebastian announces this at a conference last July and says, oh, you know, what we're doing is we're opening this, and if you want, you can sign up and take this course. You can take the course, which is the one we're giving at Stanford, And how many people are interested in this conference? There's about 80 people who say they're interested. And over the summer, since July, it goes viral. And by now there are, maybe somebody knows better than me, the last count I had is there are 135,000 people who were signed up to take the Stanford AI course material. And here we are talking about, it doesn't even start till October 3rd. Nonetheless, it's grabbed people's imagination. Because the other thing about the current infrastructure is that things can go viral. And they're hard to predict, but boy, when you see it, you see it. And Stanford's got two superb people. I mean, you couldn't possibly find better people to teach that course, so that's part of the attraction. But man, any faculty member here can now say, I'm going to take my lectures and I'm going to put them up on the internet because it's YouTube, and I don't need permission from anybody to put something on YouTube, and I can just make a YouTube account, and it's all fine. And I don't know, if 30,000 people show up, I won't even notice that. If 60,000 people show up, I won't even notice the difference because of the infrastructure. Well, maybe 135,000 people show up. I have no idea. They've got 135 students and I think 1 TA. But we'll see how it works out. But this is what the world is looking at now. While we educational administrators are sitting around, is this internet a good thing? Are we going to put our classes online? The world's going on. Institutional repositories are also changing because people now kind of say it's okay for me to put my papers online. That's a good thing. But that's not where the action is these days. These days, the action is not do I publish my journal paper, but do I publish my data? And that's really controversial among research faculty. If I want to publish my research and my nice journal paper, I want to put it out and lots of people are going to read it, great. But what really works for the progress of science, if I really care about collaborative doing science, I want to share my data. This is a data sort of center, an Uber center at University of Oregon. There's several of them, which have links to all of these data archives. And man, if you want to really agitate faculty, you say, gosh, you're doing experiments. If you really believe that getting lots of people to look at stuff makes it better for the progress of science, you'll put your data up there, and people say, what do you mean it's my data? It's my data. Right? I don't want people doing that. This is the argument that's going to be hitting over the next 10 years, and it's man serious. The world is going to be a very, very interesting place for deans. You should be thankful you're in a place where there sort of isn't a lot of data like that until people start doing research. But man, that's going to be a real issue because faculty are completely mixed about how much they believe. I believe in openness, but that much openness? Man, my data is mine. I spent my career getting it. Why should I share it with people? Okay. So that's the end of, let me see what time it is. Yeah. So that's sort of the end of the introduction to the talk, for those of you who are keeping track. And the thing I really want to talk about is why. Why should universities be supporting things like open educational resources and institutional repositories? And now I'm going to go back to the beginning when I talked about a struggle for what a university is about. And one of the reasons is that without initiatives like that, academic values are going to kind of get increasingly stressed and buried in this other view of the university as a factory that produces intellectual property. And my favorite example of this, which is a little bit mean to the Office of the General Counsel at University of Texas, is the Office of the General Counsel at UT helpfully sends a memo to faculty in all the way back in 2001, and says, gosh, you know, you got this problem. You guys have students, and they come to your courses, and they go to lectures, and they take notes. You know, I like it when students come to my classes and take notes. But you know what? If I'm not careful, if students are writing down what I'm saying in my lectures, that's copyright infringement. My God, you know, how can I condone this? Some guy's sitting there taking notes, right? You're taking notes, right? That might be copyright infringement. How can I condone this? And the Office of the General Counsel, I don't know how much of you have interacted with your lawyers, comes out with the right solution, of course. And any right solution is going to tell you that the right solution is you get your students to agree to a license at the beginning of the semester. So they say, here's a suggested license that you ask your students to agree to at the beginning of the class. And it says, my lectures are protected by law and they're mine. You're authorized to take notes, which you understand thereby is a derivative work of my copyrighted stuff and therefore is copyright infringement. But you have permission to do that, provided it's for your own personal use and no other. Right? Right, just see. Right? What did Hal say in his lecture this afternoon? And you say, I would love to tell you, but it would be copyright infringement to show you my notes. You know, this is the world that I mean, it sounds like a joke, but there's a real danger that several years from now, this will not be a joke. The underlying thing, if you're interested in this, there's a great book by Corinne McSherry, who did this as a thesis at Stanford Law School and now works for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. It says somehow in our world, in our legal structure, the only way we typically have to control quality of stuff is through this notion of ownership and copyright. And she sort of says what's happening is the academic community is adopting the language of property to talk about the stuff we really do care about, which is quality and authenticity of our knowledge. But somehow the discourse of copyright and property does not work for it. Wonderful, wonderful book called Who Owns Academic Work, which is about these issues. And we're confusing academic freedom, which is what the university is about, with another thing called freedom of property, which may be a fine thing, but it's not what the university is about. Reason one, these stresses on the university community that are caused by thinking about, am I allowed to share and copy just the materials I used to learn? Reason two, and this may sound grandiose, but I really believe it's not. The question is, are universities actually going to have a say in the progress of knowledge and the progress of science and how information happens in the information age? Are universities going to be there at all? So let's look at that. Let's adopt for a minute the discourse of, let's say, published articles being property. And let's think about how academic publication works right now. Right? Who's here from the academic publication thing? I met some people today. Right? Thank you. You guys are heroes. How does it work right now? You, the author, under US law, write something and you have your copyrighted property. You then give that property away to a journal publisher in return for the journal publisher publishing it. Once you have given that property away, that thing that you thought of as your property is now the journal's property. That's the legal frame in which we're talking about. And because the way I said it is so crazy, the journals typically will allow you to make some limited use, make you, who's merely the author, some limited use of what is now their property. That's how the system works. Right? So those of you who've not yet been in the academic publish a paper biz haven't seen this, and those of you who have know what I'm talking about. The university, merely which is where this stuff happened and created the community where it happened, gets no recognition at all in this. And if you actually were so naive as to think this had something to do with the public good, you're just on some other planet. The public is not part of this transaction about transferring property. That's how it works. What's the mechanism by which it works? If you send something to a journal, you are asked to sign something called a copyright transfer form. These days it tends to be electronically. And basically what you do is you give your property, and I really give it, in the sense of it's no longer your property. You give your property to the journal, which now has all rights except for some specific things that tend to be filled out in here, which tend to be random and totally at the disposition of the journal whose lawyer has written this contract that you are required to sign. What kinds of things are in this contract? Well, if this were a longer lecture, we could go look at some of them, because they're really fun to look at. Those of you who are asked to sign contracts, send publications to journals, probably have never ever read one of these copyright forms. You say, it's just some junky thing I have to do as part of submitting the paper. Amuse yourself by reading it. You'll be surprised at what you see. But they typically have things like, guess what? Mere author. You can actually use this material in your teaching. You can actually use our stuff in your teaching, even though it's a derivative work. Guess what? If you're making a future work, you can reuse only the charts and the figures, right? Not like the text. But you made some charts and things. You can reuse what are now our charts and figures in the future work. You can distribute copies of our article to some of your friends, and sometimes they're limited. I think the American Chemical Society allows you to distribute, I forget what it is, 75 or 50 copies of what's now the American Chemical Society's article. Sometimes you can post a copy of the article, but under restrictions. So this is an actual example. So this is Wiley Blackwell, who's one of the really, I guess their second or third largest academic publisher, right? So you may not post a copy of Wiley's article, of which you only happens to be the author, but you may not post a copy of Wiley's article except for the original manuscript you submitted before you actually made corrections in response to reviews. Right? You can reuse up to 250 words of text for non-commercial use of Wiley's article. And you may use figures. And you must note modifications. This is just one of, every publisher has its own set, and they kind of change about every year. But that's the current situation by which these work. The other thing you may not do, and the librarians and all of you who are thinking about information should understand this, is you may not do data mining and data analysis on this stuff. So if you would like to write a program that goes through the RIT libraries and does some really nice data analysis and does some really index of the stuff, and you want to post it, your RIT's libraries do not have permission to allow you to do that. And they're MIT authors. MIT faculty have had research projects that have been killed by the inability of the MIT libraries to allow them to do it. So exactly in this age of information, which is what we're all about, the powerful technology and the incredible power of combining data and allowing people to process it is being constrained by this assertion of copyright by the journals. And for very good reason, because they understand that that stuff is valuable and they want to sell the indexing services. They don't want people sitting in open source stuff to be able to use it. In other words, and I really mean this, We are moving towards private monopoly control of the scientific literature. And I do literally mean monopoly control. Because if you look at the history of scientific publishing over the last 15 years, it is a history of merger and acquisition. So those are the top publishers in 1998, and 10 years later, they have basically merged and acquired each other to now there are basically 4 players. And these are very, very large international companies that make a lot of money. Elsevier Scientific runs at about a 46% profit margin on the fees that they're charging to university libraries, by the way. That's where their money comes from. And part of the reason those fees are so large is that you're paying for the cost of the acquisitions. When Wiley acquired Blackwell in, I think, 2006, they paid 17 times earnings. And paying for that 17 times earnings is exactly what is going into the university library subscription fees. Okay? That's the world as it is. Right? There's been enormous consolidation and an enormous, a lot of times you think about, oh, publishers, it's a mom and pop thing in the basement and they're really nice and they're doing stuff. That's not where the world is. These are very, very large multinational corporations. Okay. That's what it looks like at MIT, by the way. So this is some MIT data. I'm sorry I don't have more recent data. The blue line here, this blue line, is the consumer price index since 1986. This green line here is the number of journals to which the MIT library is subscribed to. So you see that's been basically constant. And that red line is what MIT pays for subscriptions to those journals. Over a decade, rising at 3 times the consumer price index. Right, so this is manipulation. And don't tell me that, ink has gotten more expensive or something, right? No, we can prove that, right? So this purple line is the number of, this yellow line is the number of books that the MIT library buys. And that, right, and this green line, and this purple line here is what the MIT library pays for those books. So you see that basically tracks the consumer price index. But the journal prices are 3 times that. Right? You're basically looking at the cost of monopolization. And, and how do these guys get away with it? And the answer is they get away with it because we let them. As faculty, we're the producers of this stuff and we're the people who buy it. Right? What's going on? How can that possibly be? We're the people who are getting screwed. We are the producers. We are the consumers. How are we letting them do this thing? And, and I'm sure you guys in faculty meetings have heard about the library budgets, and you've seen the libraries screaming. And this is why they're screaming. Their cost of raw materials is going up 3 times the CPI. You'd scream too. Why is this? How can this possibly happen? It happens because this whole system is based on this fiction, if you like, this very important legal fiction that this transfer of copyright is being done by free will of the faculty. Right? Right? Any faculty member, given your choice, what am I going to do with my paper? I'm going to give it to Elsevier. Sure, everyone's going to do that. And the fact is, you want to get tenure, you want to get publications, you have very little choice. And very little choice because of tenure decisions that are in fact being made by the same universities that are getting screwed. So what do? You try and do something to say there's got to be a move where the faculty and the university start seeing themselves as a collective, that they have collective interests. And that's the only way to really break this. So another kind of infrastructure, now you can breathe deeply. I got past the first part of the talk, but is some kind of university policy that does that. So at MIT a couple of years ago, we passed an MIT open access policy, which sort of has the nice, wonderful boilerplate words about MIT is committed to open dissemination, but then has the killer, which says, when you become a faculty member at MIT, as a condition of your employment, you grant MIT non-exclusive rights to use your publication, to make your papers available for the purpose of open dissemination. It turns out non-commercial and all kinds of stuff. And that's a thing that MIT's granted. That was passed by unanimous vote of the faculty, which means that both members of the faculty at the faculty meeting voted for it. This is actually patterned on something that Harvard did. And so what's happened is the publishers, we had some nice quotes. There's a quote from our chairman of the faculty about, hey, isn't this wonderful? Right? We believe in MIT is about freedom of ideas, and we're going to do that. Here's another faculty member. Most faculty members, when you explain to them the system, they say, oh my God, what an insane system. I don't give a damn about this copyright thing. I'll go to jail. But of course, then they don't. And graduate students say things like, you mean I'm in a system where for the rest of my life I've got to write to publishers for permission to use my own research? And damn it, yes, that's where we're headed, and I really mean it. There are now some other initiatives, but it's growing very slowly because what's happening is the publishers are fighting back. So we have, one of the things that we had to do in getting this being passed by the whole faculty is put in an opt-out clause per article. So one of the things you can do is you can say, gee, for this particular article, I as a faculty member choose not to put it under the open access policy. And now the publishers are fighting back. So if you look at a place like the American Chemical Society, in response to that, they revised their authors agreement to say if you're at one of these institutions, one of these awful places like MIT and Harvard and a couple of other places, you must opt out of your faculty's institutional policy. The IEEE, sadly, changed, in response to this, changed its policy on whether you could republish articles to make it more restrictive if you happen to be at a place like Harvard or MIT. And this is what's happening right now. And we're trying to have these discussions going on to sort of figure out what's happening. But this is current. This is, this year, this month. Okay. So there are infrastructures, there are policies that universities can adopt to do this. Let me say a little bit about legal infrastructure. So I was involved in the startup of Creative Commons, which said back in 2000, said what can make this happen is you want a sequence of licenses that can work for material on the internet. So you probably know, or probably you don't know, if you find something on the internet which has no license associated with it, you must assume you have no rights to do anything with it. So you can't find something on the internet and just kind of reuse it and republish it. So Creative Commons tried to make a series of licenses which basically affirmatively say this stuff can be shared. And it's been enormously successful. In fact, right now, right this instant, or whatever time it is in Warsaw, but right now there's the OpenCourseWare Global Summit happening with about 300 members of the OpenCourseWare institution who are talking about global policy. I couldn't go because I had to come here, where I'd actually rather be here than in Warsaw. Don't tell anybody. Is that on the tape? Okay. And there are now I forget, about 200 million Creative Commons documents, which is an enormous success. One of the things I strongly recommend is that you use Creative Commons licenses on materials and you promote that. And the nice thing is you kind of don't have to say that very much anymore. It was like everything else I'm talking about with open educational resources. When we started, they said, why would I want to do that? What are you talking about? And now it's kind of in the vocabulary. They're the licenses. You probably have looked on the internet and seen some stuff that looks like that. Those are Creative Commons licenses. Okay. Let me go to the last part of the talk. which is a little bit different. This is a little bit more aimed at the, well, I shouldn't say for this audience. This is really aimed at people who think about information technology. I'll take it back. It's not a little bit different. There's a wonderful book, again, if you get a chance to read something, by Jonathan Zittrain at Harvard Law School called, one of the greatest book titles ever, The Future of the Internet and How to Stop It. But what Jonathan has done, he's done an analysis that says, I mean, just look at this tremendous thing that's gotten built since 1970, 1960, 1980. The reason we're all here, the enormous power of computing and the internet. And Jonathan said, how could that have happened? What's the thing that allowed it to grow? What's the thing that allowed the World Wide Web to be, some guy, Tim Berners-Lee in CERN, trying to trade physics articles with a couple of his friends, and now suddenly it's made this enormous thing. And Jonathan identifies the characteristic of a technology that he calls generativity. And what generativity means is the thing is made in such a way that other people can now extend it and find other uses for it in ways the designers simply did not anticipate. And he goes back and does this wonderful analysis of generativity and say the two striking examples of generativity in our current technology were the PC platform, which is generative. Notice, whatever you think of Microsoft, it is not the case that in order to write a program and run it on a Windows machine, you need permission or certification from Redmond. Anybody can write any program on Windows machine. And the other example of generativity is the internet. Anybody can connect pretty much anything to the internet. And what Jonathan is saying is, guess what? Until now. So you can go and run any program you want on a Windows machine, but try that with an app submitted to the iPhone market. Right? You can put anything you want on the internet, but kind of try that with some of these cloud computing infrastructures. Now, we can argue about whether those restrictions are good or not, but in fact, we are moving towards architectures which are at risk of losing their generativity. And if you believe Jonathan's argument that generativity is key for the expansion that's made this information economy what it is, you should be worried about this erosion of generativity. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. The other thing that some people call this is freedom to tinker. It's another nice word promoted by Ed Felton and other people. Right? Are these platforms tinkerable? Can you take this stuff? Many of us who started with computing, and people who started computers in the 80s, the wonderful thing is that you got this personal computing and you could screw around with it and do things. And the thing I've been working on lately is worrying about this. When the iPad first came out, there was a wonderful quote from one of the hackers who basically said, if I had an iPad when I was growing up, I'd never have been a programmer because I would not have had that opportunity to sort of get into, I can control it. Many of the, everybody extols the great internet entrepreneurs of the last 10 or 15 years. These great entrepreneurs are people now in their 40s and 50s who in their 80s were teenage kids who were hacking around with computers because they could. And the thing you want to ask yourself is that going to be true of the current generation of 13 and 14-year-olds? Will they grow up in a world where there is freedom to tinker in the mobile infrastructure? So one of the things that I've been working on in my little sabbatical at Google was the notion that, gee, we can try and make a programming platform where you give people the idea that it should be very, very easy to make mobile apps. So this is let me see if this video works. This is a 1-minute video that we produced at Google to give you an image of it. So this is, that's Karen's cat. And there's Karen. Karen's going to make a little app that has a picture of her cat and makes it meow. And you'll see about how easy it is. She brings this thing up and says, I want to make a new project which is called Hello Purr, which is Hello World in Cat. There's a place where I can say what the programs are. I'm going to use this by connecting the phone to my computer with a USB cable. I'm going to say, gee, what's in this app is a button. And that button's going to look like a picture of my cat. And there you see it on the phone. And now I'm going to add a little sound to it, which is a meow. I'm going to pull out the programming block for the button that says what you do when the button clicks. And I'm going to say, when the button clicks, you play the sound. And now that's the whole program. And I'm going to say, put it on the phone, and end of program. Okay. Okay, that's about how easy this is. Let me show you another program. Let's see if you can figure out what it does. This says, let me read it for you. You see that? That says, when I get a text message from some number that says something, I say to the thing on my phone that'll send text messages, send a text message back to that number. And the message I send back is, sorry, I'm driving now. I'll text you later. And then I send the message, and then I'm going to tell the phone's text-to-speech generator to say to me, right, to speak to me, a message received from that number, and the text was the message. You got the program? Right, so that's what it looks like. This program, when we were first putting out App Inventor, what's interesting is this was done by a freshman at University of San Francisco who had never programmed before. The course he was in is not even a computer science course. It's one of these appreciation to internet kind of things. And by now, of course, there are about 100,000 apps like that. And that was over the last, in the last 2 years. When he did that, it was one of the first. In fact, it was striking enough that it actually got written up in Wired. So Daniel Finnegan, who was the freshman, made this no text while driving app. And it was significant enough that it was easy to make an app like that. And the Wired reporter got it, right? He said, really, what has to happen is computer programming and this mobile infrastructure needs to be democratized. And that's what this project is about. So when you see about all of these apps coming out, do people, not you guys, because there are wonderful courses here in making apps, but does the world think of this mobile infrastructure as something that you can shape and be creative, or is it purely a consumer technology? And you have to ask yourself, if it's going to be purely a consumer technology, what's that mean for the evolution of the network and the evolution of information technology? Let me just sort of show off a little bit. This is a project that was done by 3 students in a class I taught last spring, and I don't want to say, gee, this is a wonderful MIT thing, because the cool part is that anybody now can do this in any class. This is a little app which was a 3-week student project that's based on these Comber urine analysis strips, where they do various medical tests. They're made by Hoffman LaRoche. And the app basically says you take a strip, you put a sample on it. Yeah, you take a strip and you put a sample on it, and you take a picture of it with the cell phone camera, and it does the very, very simplest image analysis. Let's say, is this thing red, or is this square red or pink or green, and this next one this, and then it presents, and then it shows you the diagnosis. Maybe it shows you the diagnosis, maybe it immediately sends that to a clinic that's monitoring you. But it's really, really simple. And there's a project at MIT that thinks about the implications of mobile technology for inexpensive diagnostic equipment in the developing world. And in fact, there's a This picture is from 3 weeks ago, where they're testing it at a clinic in Nicaragua. And everybody was really excited. They said, wow, look at this great thing. And they all ran around saying, gosh, where can we get as much urine as we can fast in order to do this stuff? But that's just a little image of what you can do. And obviously what you could be doing in your courses on mobile apps. There's an enormous opportunity. So Google decided about in August that they didn't want to actually release App Inventor as a product because they said, gee, that actually doesn't fit in our product portfolio with things like Gmail and stuff. And so instead, they worked with us to launch a new center at MIT. So this is just getting off the ground. We announced it in August, called the MIT Center for Mobile Learning. And it's right at the stage where there are 3 of us who've gotten together. So one thing it's going to be doing is working in App Inventor. Another thing that it includes is, which you may have heard of, is Scratch, which is a great thing for making it really easy for like 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds to be very creative in media programming. And then the third thing it's working with is a place called the Education Arcade at MIT. Some of you in gaming might know the work of Eric Klopfer. And this is sort of MIT's mobile gaming thing. And the 3 of us are sitting down now saying, oh, well, we have this thing called the Center, the MIT Center for Mobile Learning. Gee, what's mobile learning? What should we do? Maybe you can tell us. Anyway, so that's brand new stuff just getting off the ground. And we can talk about more later if you'd like. So summary. Okay. There really is, really, and I mean it, a struggle going on for what the future of academia is going to be in the age of the internet, and in fact, for the disposition of knowledge. And universities have core institutional reasons to prefer openness. Second point is you really can do this. There is infrastructure to support openness. There's certainly the technical infrastructure, whether there is the will in our university culture and our university policies to say, it's been easy so far to talk about academic freedom, and it's been easy to talk about openness, but now it is going to matter. Do we really believe what we've been saying? Do we have the will to do something about it? And with that, I will thank you. Okay. So we have
ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open up the floor for questions. If you have any, please raise your hand and wait for either me or Jenny on the other side to come to you with the microphone.
So I'm the person who's responsible for the portion of the library collection that serves this college, and well, thank you. I would like to thank you for doing me a tremendous favor by showing the graphic of the cost structure. That's something that I've had to deal with throughout my career, but I'm starting to hear tales from colleagues of mine at other libraries who are seeing publishers and database vendors approach faculty directly with marketing pitches. Then the faculty member may get excited about that product, come to the library, and of course the librarian says, oh, no, we can't fund that. And it's incomplete and disingenuous to just blame the administration for not funding the library. I mean, this is the reason. I think you demonstrated very aptly why, if you've asked me for things, I may have said no. Those of you in the audience who are faculty in this college, it's also tied up in this is that we no longer, now that everything is migrated to the digital world, we no longer choose which journal titles that we subscribe to and which we don't. We purchase bundled packages from publishers directly or from third-party vendors, and we buy a lot of things that will be useful to you and a lot that won't be. But we devote so many large pools of resources to purchasing these that now, when it comes to a point where maybe we need to cut because of a loss of funding, the decisions become extremely difficult because you'll be throwing out the baby with the bathwater if you cut a large package subscription rather than having the control to say, I'm going to cut this journal because no one's reading it, but I'm going to preserve this one because everybody's reading it.
Right. Thank you so much for saying that. This is a discussion that has to go on university campuses. And the faculty see it only when the journals disappear. The deans see it when the library comes in and makes what seems like these outrageous demands. And you have to understand, these guys' cost of raw materials is going up at 3 times the CPI. The faculty see it by, I don't know, at MIT we get these things saying, which of the following journals is it okay to cancel? And then the one thing you did not mention, in the digital world, the library does not buy journals. It rents them. So if you decide that you're going to cancel your subscription to the Journal of Semi-Algebraic Morphological Neurophysiology, you not only lose the current issues, you lose the back issues. So the library, in fact, no longer buys journals, it rents them. This is the system that we're all walking into, and it's a system that we are willingly, as faculty, supporting it, mostly through our promotion and tenure policies. By saying it that way, I don't mean there's an easy solution, but we need to understand what's going on. Thank you so much.
So I was reading an article the other day about food by Michael.
I didn't hear.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was reading an article by Michael Pollan, who writes a lot about food. And he was talking about the problems with commercialization of agriculture and food production.
Right.
And, and regulatory capture, so that the regulations at the federal and state level are largely written by the industries that want to, skew things in their favor. I think you have the same sort of situation happening in an area like this.
Oh, absolutely.
But what he used as an example is he said, we knew back in the 30s that cigarettes and tobacco caused lung cancer, and nothing much happened until the states realized that if they sued the tobacco industry, they could get a lot of money from it to cover the costs that they were paying for taking care of all the lung cancer patients. So, he's saying you have to find allies, because when you're up against industries that can buy congressmen for $5,000, you need allies. So who are our natural allies?
I mean, as cynical as all of us are about Congress, there's a natural part to it, which is intellectual property law is complicated. And Congress are not really experts in it. If you look at the US copyright law, which is about, I think, 300 pages of text, I may have it slightly wrong, there's probably not a line in that was actually written by Congress. These are things that are written by the players, and part of it is industry, but the way the US makes intellectual property law is Congress kind of says, the players should get together who have something to bring to the table. They make an agreement about what should happen, and Congress pretty much endorses that. That's what happened in all of these industries. And the question is, in the world of scientific knowledge and communications, are the universities going to say, hey, we have something to bring to the table, and if you want to respect our values, you have to start listening to us. Universities have not done that so far. Well, sure, Walt Disney can do that, but the universities, by and large, are not, and that's the change that has to happen. But it'll happen only if we care. I just want to say that. We have to really say, do we want that world? Do we want a world in which you should have to share your research data? Do you want that as a researcher? Right? These are not easy decisions.
Hi there, my name is Brian. Where can we get your slides?
You're stuck by technology. You can't speak.
Did you create an app or anything to?
I just had a simple question. One of your slides, you showed the American Chemical Association and IEEE
Okay, question. He just asked about the American Chemical Society. I don't know if you know chemists. Chemists exist as an oppressed as an oppressed population by the American Chemical Society. The American Chemical Society believes, for good or bad, believes that it is the proper steward of all chemical research literature, and all these other places like universities should be its franchisees. IEEE is not quite saying that, but IEEE, like a lot of other organizations, has gotten hooked on its journal fees to support the organization. So I know some wonderful people in IEEE who will say, what the hell are you trying to do with this open access thing? You are basically trying to disembowel the organization by removing our source of profit. And somebody has to say, where do you sit, IEEE? Are you a membership organization working for your members, or are you a place that's trying to profit on your IEEE archives? So, you know, it's hard. For the best will in the world, these organizations, even the ones that we respect and love, have just gotten hooked on these publication fees. And that's what's going on. So that's why it's not only the evil commercial publishers, it's the societies too.
Well, while he was talking, you missed a question about where to get
Yeah.
the slides.
Where to get the slides?
Thank
I don't
you.
know, we'll get the slides somewhere.
How much?
Someone say slides. I'll give the slides to someone, and you can. Somebody want to say where to get the slides? You can. Nancy or something?
So my question is, now we have Internet University. Can you talk about your vision about the role of the teachers in the future?
The role of the university teachers?
Yes, yes.
Well, the role of the university teachers is what it's been, right? It's been to deeply inspire students, partly by the way they teach, and partly by the way they behave, and partly by the way they consult with people. I don't think any of the digital stuff changes that very much. I mean, oh gosh, there was tremendous consternation in the U.S. K through 12 when people introduced the technology of blackboards, for God's sake, where they said, you know, you're making this stuff and you write all this stuff, and where's the role of the teacher? You know, and textbooks. You know, a university used to be, what's lecture mean, right? All you historians, right? Lecture means to read. A university was a place where you went and you heard Fourier read to you his notes on mathematics. And if those notes now are out on the internet, those notes are now published, right, through this, what's the reason to go to a university? And the same thing, this stuff's on the internet. You know, as far as I'm concerned, there's great stuff going on, but man, I wouldn't want to replace a real education and being part of an educational community by watching stuff on television. You know, so the role of the faculty is to make more effective use of these wonderful tools. Why do I waste my time lecturing in front of a class when I could be using that class time really working with students, you know, in small groups because they can get at the lectures?
At the risk of alienating you, in Germany, my salary was paid for by the state. And so I thought, like you did, I should make my stuff available because the state is paid by the taxpayers. Now, if I worked for a company, my intellectual property would belong to the company because they pay my salary and pay my lab. So the question in this open university is, where is the business model? Because it's not really fair for, let's say, RIT students to fund RIT is largely tuition-driven, to fund RIT, and then the professors' developments that are funded by the students are available for everybody. Concrete example, Austria. Currently, German students press into Austria because Germany does not have enough spots for the students to study, and the Austrian taxpayer is very unhappy about this because the German students are not paying the Austrian state for making the education and making the materials available. So, question, where's the business model?
Right, so where's the business model in the world of open? I mean, Maybe we have time to stay after. We probably don't have another hour now. But briefly, there are two kinds of answers. Let me give two very different answers. Let me give sort of the radical answer, which says if universities are doing this awful thing and there's no business model, and we all agree that it's better for society for this knowledge to be open, well, okay. You know, there are industries that went away. That's not the one I believe, but it's one that you hear. The one I believe is universities have to actually think about what their value is. And if you think the value of the university is the course notes and the ability to do little exams that you get online, you know, you can say that as much as you want, but it ain't going to stop Sal Khan, that a bunch of universities are whining that he's putting up physics questions that universities might do. It just isn't going to stop. And we all have to figure out what is the actual value we provide to students. And the answer is, you asked what the role of the faculty. The answer is it really is about inspiring students individually and interacting with them, remembering that we as faculty are not just sources of notes and things, we're people. And it matters what we do, and it matters how we interact. So that's the answer I believe. Getting to either of them is, you know, it ain't going to be easy. Like I said, it's going to be interesting times.
Well, as the dean of the college, I'm just so pleased that we're able to bring such interesting and insightful speakers to campus to share their thoughts with RIT. So please join me in thanking Hal one more time for his presentation. And just before we wrap things up, I just wanted to present this small token of our appreciation on behalf of the college.
Thank you. What is it? Oh, unwrap it. Let me not unwrap it.
He's got to unwrap it, so we'll go with it.
Thank you very much. Okay.
And I